Folks, I've said many times over that the original fat PlayStation 3 consoles, CCH-A01, B01, the big, beautiful, black, sexy machine that I love so much, is still, like, by and large, the ultimate PlayStation console, and one of the only consoles out there that really does have that capability of playing 3 generations of PlayStation locally via disc. It's an amazing thing, and that's why I love those early machines so much. But, I can't shake off this feeling that we are in a very different landscape nowadays, to where by the time PlayStation 6 does come out, and, assuming it does have a disc drive as well, now we can debate all day, every day if the console will have a disc drive or not, but it still will be a machine that on paper returns back to that form of PlayStation 3, and that will be a platform that plays 3 generations of PlayStation: PS4, 5, and PlayStation 6 native software. This is where we could really get into semantics about what that really means, when conceivably, 4, 5, and 6 games are all going to look really similar. But I guess that's also where there's a conversation topic to be had here, and that, it's so fascinating how consoles are so PC-like, but also not PC-like, because they're still highly optimized boxes that have that advantage of economies of scale. So, I've mentioned this time and time again on like LTPS and things like that, but consoles will still always have this advantage over PCs because it's Sony as a big platform holder. They can manufacture these consoles in mass and get these parts at a massive discount. They're also still very bespoke in that Sony can collaborate with AMD very closely and cherry pick certain GPU features out of the AMD roadmap. And so it's still never this sort of one-for-one thing with consoles versus PC. Consoles will always have a certain upside, but they're still similar enough in that we're now talking about, again, in theory, when PlayStation 6 comes out, this is a console that will be able to play PS6 software, PS5 Pro settings, PS5 native software, PS4 Pro settings, and base PS4 games. And with PSSR coming in, and that might really improve the software over time to where that can possibly retroactively be turned on for a lot of really old software, that being your 1080p PS4 games, and we could see some dramatic gains for some of those games. And then there's also the other aspect that I can't help but think. It's like, obviously, I think the pipe dream we would all love here. It's not going to happen probably ever. I usually refrain from saying ever, but I just cannot really picture this ever happening at all. But there's still that pipe dream of some kind of like crazy PlayStation console that Sony makes, and they even are very forward about this. Hey, this is going to cost a lot of money. Let's say easily more than $1,000. I mean, I wouldn't even want to humor putting a price tag on this thing, but it would be the kind of console where it is the ultimate PlayStation. It plays every PlayStation console, every handheld, even accepts local playback, which that's where it just gets really silly, because Sony would have to fire up sort of UMD manufacturing again to a degree, because the console would have to have a UMD slot in it. Of course, you'd have to put a cell processor SoC on the board to facilitate playback of PlayStation 3 software. PS3 is really the problem there. You would have to make sure a CD laser is in there for PS1 playback, because actually PlayStation 5 cannot read or play CDs. So I mean, there's so many avenues to sort of, again, get into semantics, but like in theory, the pipe dream is we would all love a PlayStation console that, even as a compromise, we'd say, okay, it's going to cost a ton of money, but that's fine. We'd love to have that. Also having like a Vita card reader in there as well. Again, would love to have it. Probably not ever going to happen. But the thing is, looking at the Classics program on PSN right now, it's been 2 years down the road, and I'll still, complain about this all day, every day. It's been such a slow rollout. Every month we can get 3 to 4, maybe 5, like new classic games restored on PlayStation 4 and 5. And we've seen that run the gamut. I mean, it leans heavily on Sony IP, because that's the kind of stuff that Sony can easily get brought forward, because really the issue here is not necessarily emulating PS1, 2, and PSP games. It's the license for these games that are really hung up, and a lot of them are just simply in purgatory and probably can never feasibly come back. But between that slow rollout of restoring those classic games, we've seen a lot of Sony IP, some third-party support there as well, even a lot of like niche out-of-nowhere titles that I wasn't necessarily expecting. But, over time, 4 years later, going into PlayStation 6, that's a library of classic games across PS1, 2, and PSP that are slowly getting restored. It'd be great to eventually see PS Vita, and we could see them easily facilitate a software solution for being able to have back touch and front touch on there. Just they had a solution on PlayStation TV. They could easily keep that going on the home consoles, I should say. Anyway, it's just it was a lot of thinking rattling around in my head lately of like, PlayStation 6 by the time that console does come out, and also accounting for various remasters, ports, remakes from various studios, whether it's from Sony or third parties. I mean, we've seen a lot of, especially PS3 stuff, right? Because PS3 is, again, the problem here. And there's another conversation to be had about maybe they'll finally build an emulator that can reliably emulate PlayStation 3 on PS6, because PS6 might be the console with the CPU overhead to maybe get an emulation layer that facilitates good reliable compatibility for a bunch of cell processor heavy PS3 games. But I digress, folks. The point is we've got a lot of 7th gen games that across various studios we're already seeing native ports or remasters on PlayStation 4. So if you sort of cherry pick all this stuff together, right, whether it's a classics program, a remaster, a port, I mean, there's now a lot of software on the PlayStation Store. PS4 and up very much was 2013 was foundationally this new era for PlayStation that at the time it did feel like a total reset. When you left PS3 for PS4, brand new library, no backwards compatibility, strictly PS4 games. But here we are, right, in 2024, 4 years away probably from PlayStation 6. And, over time, this is a foundation that has really paid dividends for the availability of games on these platforms. It was slow, it took a long time, but it's just a fascinating thing to think that by the time PlayStation 6 comes out, however good PSSR is going to be for a lot of the back catalog of games that maybe aren't going to see native versions, but then you've got all these various, settings now where a game might have a pro setting for PS4 or a pro setting for 5, and I can't shake off the feeling that there's actually been a lot of, upside to newer hardware being introduced and going into PlayStation 6. I mean, I think there's a lot of flexibility that is, in a way, being severely overlooked nowadays. Right? It's just, I don't know, there always seems to be a lot of pessimism surrounding the console market nowadays and the game output. And I don't know, I've never really understood it entirely when so much stuff comes out. You can't even keep up with all the good games that are available nowadays. There's a bunch of classics finally getting restored. If you want the very best out of your games, then you've got these pro models always being introduced, and consoles, in terms of the price to performance ratio that you could sometimes get on PC, it's still very favorable for consoles. So you're getting gorgeous looking games. No doubt there's obviously things we can point out that has been problematic this entire way through. That being your heavy live service lean for a lot of studios, monetization, subscription, what subscription has done to the games business, cloud streaming, which is not necessarily bad, just that there's an obvious push here that some people are reluctant to sign up with, and so but I'm not really the kind of person that wants to sort of dwell on those things. I just think in the future we are looking at PlayStation hardware that in a way might rival what PlayStation 3 was doing at the time. I still stand by PS3 being, and again those early models with the PS2 SoC on the board, those being some incredible machines that were in a way sort of over and under engineered, because they're reliability is a problem with those things, obviously, because the whole aspect of how those things were manufactured, and there's just a very obvious defect. But there's just I think PS3 over time is now going to start seeing something that's going to give it a run for its money, and that's actually PlayStation 6. And hopefully PlayStation 6 is a console that at some point starts seeing perhaps a new emulation layer for PlayStation 3 software. Maybe that's the console that finally will offer it. I mean, I don't know. I actually, in a way, I'm kind of looking forward to a PlayStation 6. But I guess you can enjoy it in the here and now, which is a lot of games coming out, and we've got this storefront that is not no longer expires when new consoles come out. A library that continues to grow, iterates over time, and really the only actual issue long term is licenses, 10-year plus licenses that Sony will sometimes make with a particular game when it releases on the store, or a publisher, or maybe there's music licensed in a game and it's only available for again 10, 15, 20 years, depends on that license. But it's just a matter of like Steam as an everlasting storefront. Like things get taken down from Steam all the time because it simply might be a byproduct of that. So the really only like core issue fundamentally is this long-term stuff that may get delisted, which then becomes a problem with, well, simply digital software. That's why we hope PlayStation 6 still does offer disc playback, and the console will also be able to keep accepting discs for PS4 and PS5 software. But I just think there is more upside, assuming this does go down the path that we're already seeing play out for the past, well, this would be 11 years now, right? Going back to 2013. It's been, I actually think, pretty good, pretty encouraging, and now the ultimate setup is a PlayStation 3 next to the latest PS console, so that way you have the local playback and then the everlasting storefront that was set up on PlayStation 4 and beyond. Anyway, that's just some food for thought. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, and I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.